Hi, this is Kirk Davis, Executive Director of CAMPS. I'm here today with Michael Langhout, a member of CAMPS and an incredible business consultant, coach, somebody that I've come to know brings a lot of value to businesses. And I can say that not because I've seen him in action as much, but I've actually seen the results of his work. So, Michael, I've talked to some of your clients.
Well, thank you, Kirk.
They sing your praises. But you have a lot of industry background yourself. I mean, you come from a very successful background, and I think it'd be helpful. We're going to be talking on the topic of business resilience, and we're getting ready for our event that's coming up on business resilience. You're going to be facilitating the panel, so we're very excited about that. But I think it'd be really nice for everybody to kind of hear your background and where you're coming from.
Well, sure, Kirk, that's fine, and I'm happy to do that. Yeah, so on the topic of resilience, before I get into the background, I think resilience, thinking about it is a difficult concept to define. Doesn't have a clear definition. And that's partly because it's a bit elusive and takes a long time to develop. It's like personality or creativity.
Yeah.
It's something that happens after a certain amount of life circumstances. So, for instance, younger people may not be as resilient as folks that have been through more life circumstances that have developed them and refined them. It's like sharpening a sword. You just you're continually doing that. And as you engage in various activities in your life, some of which will knock you down,
Yes.
and others will lift you up. But I like to say God never promised us a rose garden, so we have to pay attention to those events in our lives and how we relate to them.
Absolutely, yes. In fact,
so my background, I came out of University Washington with MBA in finance and marketing. Set me up nicely for an understanding of how business is supposed to work. And when I got into the business, I realized I really didn't know very much. Mm-hmm. And so I have always approached issues and any business issue particularly with a deep curiosity. And I think that came from my time in the university and realizing that it was great time and great to study everything and to have that academic background. But you really, when I really got out into the world and realized that I needed to dig deeper, and it's always been for me a quest of digging deeper to find the truth, to find answers, and I use that quite effectively in my coaching.
Oh, that's good.
I find that what appears to be real on the surface is not really what's happening. So it's the quality of the question. It's going deeper. That where we make progress, and oftentimes it's very uncomfortable.
Yes.
It's in that discomfort that we find progress. Mm-hmm. I entered the work world in the packaging industry. I put myself through college working in a corrugated box plant. It was a natural progression. My dad was in the corrugated packaging industry, and I went into a large multinational corporation, the Weyerhaeuser Company. Started out in sales in a box plant in Olympia, Washington, and just grew from there. Just became promoted. I had higher levels of responsibility, increasing levels of revenue, accountability, and people reporting to me over time. I was in that company for about 15 years. And I was a bit of a nonconformist. I left the company because the way that I operated was very innovative, very entrepreneurial. I started a box plant for them in Portland, Oregon. and realized that my love was in really at that time was in starting companies, and particularly early stage or mid-market growth companies. So I left that company and joined a small packaging company in Renton, here in Renton, Washington, and ran that business for another owner, for an absentee owner for a number of years. He also had a consulting company, and so I gravitated over into that.
Okay.
And that where I built large-scale manufacturing facilities around North America, up in maritime provinces of Canada, Los Angeles. Built a large, very successful corrugated manufacturing facility in Los Angeles area, and was just generally involved in managing some of their facilities. Did a career pivot at about age 50. And went into medical technology and healthcare services, particularly related to hearing loss. I have a daughter. That has a profound sensory neural hearing loss that she acquired at age 2.5 due to spinal meningitis, and so that shaped my life experience. That experience shaped my career, actually. And where I was quite devastated with it and kind of knocked down, if you will, with the news of that. Quickly got back up and realized, look, life goes on. Let's deal with this.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I found a passion for that and founded a couple of companies in that sector. One was right before 9/11. And the second was right before the 2008 economic collapse. So I have a habit of starting companies right in front of major disasters. Had a successful exit from the first one. And the second one, we pushed, that one was venture capital funded, and just couldn't quite get it to a level of commercialization. So left that and moved into a coaching role. That would have been about 2013. So it's now been, going on, what is that, about 8 years now. And it's really the role that I think I was ultimately designed to do. It involves teaching, which I never really wanted to be. I wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't want to do it in an academic setting. So this allows me to accomplish that and have that as part of what I do, a big part of what I do. But today in coaching, my main objective is helping leadership teams come together and be more highly functional, and in the process building up some really great enterprise value.
By the way, Michael, if I can mention, and I so appreciate what you said about building the enterprise value. But for those listening, Michael's been doing podcasting for quite a while, and you've got some marvelous podcasts on your website. So,
well, thank you for that, Kirk. Yeah, it's a real passion, and something that is actually fun to do. I've got it on hold right now due to the pandemic and COVID, but I'll fire it back up again after the first of the year. I've got about 26 topics that I want to discuss with various authors, all in the area of business development and leadership development and that. So there's a lot of really good material out there that I just like to talk about.
Yeah,
that's ceobrainfood.com. I'll put a little plug in for that, ceobrainfood.com. I've been a member of camps now for, I don't know how many years, but probably 6 or 8 years. And really have enjoyed my association with camps. Great organization. In fact, one of the certifications that I have in my coaching as part of my toolkit for coaching is the Great Game of Business. Oh, yeah. And that group really came out of an experience that Jack Stack had in Springfield, Missouri with the Springfield Remanufacturing Corporation. And Jack, kind of well known, he wrote the book, The Great Game of Business, back in the mid-90s, which is where I got introduced to him. And I know that Camps had him out to do a keynote when it started back in 2008.
That's right.
So just a great alliance there, a good association. So
That's right. Yeah, it's a community of manufacturing companies, and I've had so many people express to me the value they've gained from meeting and talking to working with other manufacturers. And you've had a career in manufacturing, and I think you
that's right.
really understand the importance of that networking, connecting, and brain trust essentially that comes out of camps. And today is a really good example of that.
Yes, and manufacturing is, is an industry. I mean, it's just evolved so much from the time that I got into it, where it was, so much manual labor.
Yes.
And today, so many of those jobs have been taken over by technology. That doesn't mean that they're reducing their workforce. Those putting those people back to work doing other things. Today they can do many things, but it's amazing to see the impact of technology, and it's still, we're just in the infancy of it. It's amazing
Right.
to watch.
On our panel coming up on resilience, we've got Justin from Heritage Distilling Company and Allison from Out of the Box and Jim Michelle from Electric Mirror, who are going to be joining us on this panel. But we've done virtual tours right now with Heritage Distilling Company and with Out of the Box with Allison. And yeah, this is not your father's manufacturing company.
No.
These places are clean, they are automated, there's technology. It's really remarkable. I think when you look underneath the hood of manufacturing today, it's becoming high tech.
Yes, and but we can't lose sight of the fact that it still takes people and process to develop great products. People, process, products. That's really the three-legged stool that you've got to work on, and it goes. You peel that onion back, it goes pretty deep. Anytime you get people working together, it's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the best companies. So
no, in fact, the people challenge, and I think when it comes to resilience, I think the companies right now are reeling from the pandemic, and unfortunately, we saw great layoffs, coming as a result. And now that the economy is gearing back up again, there is some pain back in terms of finding the right people, but none of this has been easy, really. And so I think that's why our topic is so good.
no, it's a terrific topic because the COVID pandemic really impacted every one of us. There wasn't one person that's listening to this podcast or this interview or that will listen to the panel. There's not one person that wasn't impacted in some way. At least, at the very least, in our, sort of mentally, psychologically, it's like, gosh, what's happening here? And it still has that type of impact. I know that's true for me. My business was not too deeply impacted. I had a couple of clients that had to go through some layoffs, and they were very painful. But we always coached around the concept of really your employees are kind of a family. I mean, would you lay off your family, and how can you develop a strategy to keep people employed? And I know at least two of the panelists did not have layoffs.
Wow.
And I'm looking forward to that conversation in terms of their mentality and kind of thinking around that. I think it's probably partly cultural, but partly innovative. And what are some of the strategies that we can put into place to keep people working? I know at Springfield Remanufacturing in Springfield, Missouri, with Jack Stack and the Great Game, they have about 2,000 employees. They've got 12 companies, and they're all, they're all related to remanufacturing engines for large equipment and trucks and so on. That's what they do. It's a kind of very dirty kind of a job. They'll take an old engine and clean it up and finish it up and put on new parts and resell it. But they have, as I said, they have about 2,000 employees. I don't believe they had to lay anyone off. They did do quite a bit of adjusting on shifts, dropping back from 40 hours down to maybe something less than that. And I think they took a few cuts in their pay.
Yeah.
To try to ease the pain a little bit. But now they're coming back and they're strong. And I think that's one of the things we have to really think about on anytime we're faced with the layoff, that big capital L dilemma. It's always painful.
Yes.
And yet, because payroll is typically very high up on the operating expenses listed on the general ledger of the income statement, it's number one or number two, something like that usually. And so it's a target. How can we reduce? And so it's easy to come in and say, well, we're going to take 10% off. The company that I work for, Weyerhaeuser, was famous for that. About every 7 or 10 years, they'd have a big reduction in force and they would lay off 10% of their workforce.
Wow.
That was just how they operated. That's not my value system, but that was the values of the company that I entered, the workforce and worked for a lot of years.
Yes.
So the question then is, well, when you think about a cost benefit, what's it going to cost you once you lose that person, assuming you're not going to hire them back? That person walks out the door with a lot of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's often said that, it's the equivalent of, 1 year's salary or 2 years' salary, or I've even seen studies that have shown up to 15 times salary it costs to replace a person, depending on where they're at in the company.
Yes.
Obviously, the higher up they are, the more costly it is. And so when you think about laying someone off, you've got to think about the total investment that you've got in that person and what's it going to take to hire someone else to replace that person. It's not a simple equation. It's a very, very costly thing. So when we look at and typically I'll look at turnover as one of the key areas in coaching, that becomes a very big deal.
Yeah. So if I could ask, it's kind of a little bit off of the topic, but a lot of times when I talk to companies who are growing or want to grow, I should say, they'll often say that the people who brought me to this point in my business are probably not the same people who will get me to where I want to go. Mm-hmm. Usually it's not so much about the people, but it's about the capabilities of the company. But have you come across that type of thinking in your experience?
Oh, it's not only have I come across the thinking, I've come across the reality of it in business. And it's very, very painful to have to say to someone who was there, say, present at the creation, or someone that's doing a job that just is not capable of advancing. Because, and that's for me anyway, it's painful. It's not painful for some people, but I have a very, strong passion for taking care of people, and while they're under my direction or supervision. But it's so important to be clear about that with them. It's so important, because here's the thing, if you are not dealing with the issue, so we like to categorize it in terms of the A performer or the B performer or the C performer. Now listen, I mean, I know that that's very subjective, but if you were to grid it out, your vertical axis would be conformance to core values, culture, purpose. Your horizontal axis would be conformance to or a contribution of productivity. How much of a contribution are you making to the company? You lay that out on the two axes and come up with a Boston box or an Eisenhower box where you've got 4, and you've got A performers, and down in the lower left, low compliance with core values, low productivity. Well, you have got to move those people either into a different job or out of the company. And the sooner you do it, the better. And the bottom line is, it's not only is it hurting you as a company because they're not performing, and also for the A performers who have to pick up the slack,
Yes.
you have flight risk.
Right.
They're going to be out looking for jobs because look, they already know what's not written. They already know that this is going on.
That's
They're
right.
waiting for you as the leader to do something about it. And if you're stuck and can't make that move, then you're risking losing your A performers. And that happens all the time. So I often say, if you want to 10x your company, you've got to 10x your people.
Yes.
I look at the investment companies make in training and learning, and it's pathetic. It's like that's one of the places they go to save money. It's, well, if we have to cut back, let's cut back on
Yeah.
training and learning. And that is just a very, very dangerous thing to do. If you 10xing your company, you got to 10x your people. You want to 10x your people, you got to 10x yourself.
Yeah.
Constantly reading, constantly learning.
Mm-hmm.
And look, this becomes really difficult in a family business.
Mm-hmm.
The mom and dad started the company, the sons and daughters take over. Inevitably, one or two of them are not qualified to do the work that they're doing at the position that they're at, and somebody's got to make a change, and they typically don't want to do that because they're afraid of the consequences in the family. So it gets very complicated.
Yeah, and of course that was just a little bit off the topic, but again, I think your wisdom there, the ability to confront it, do something about it. I really love the thought, if you're going to 10x your business, you have to 10x yourself first.
Right.
And there's a process for 10xing your people. Now, I wanted to go back to the topic a little bit of resilience, because you've written articles on this. I've seen you've done interviews on your podcast about this. I really enjoyed your article, and you and I were talking just before this recording about the Stockdale paradox. And I think that Jim Collins in the book Good to Great shared, I think in the Stockdale paradox, I don't think enough people have read deep enough into the book to know that. Do you have some insight into the Stockdale paradox?
Sure. Yeah. So Jim Stockdale, for those that may remember or who don't know, was a prisoner of war for 8 years at the prisoner of war camp in North Vietnam in Hanoi, a place called the Hanoi Hilton. And he was punished and beaten for 8 years. Now I can't personally imagine that. Absolutely amazing what he went through and to have survived. And so he was conducting a conference in Palo Alto while Jim Collins was a professor of business in the business school at Stanford. And he knew that Stockdale was across the street conducting a conference. And so he called him up and said, I'd love to interview you. And so he went over, they met. And one of the questions that Jim Collins asked Jim Stockdale was, who didn't make it? Who are the ones that didn't make it? And he said, the answer to that question is easy. The optimists. They were the ones that said, we'll be out by Christmas, and that didn't happen. So then, we'll be out by Easter, and that didn't happen. So we'll be out by Thanksgiving, that didn't happen. Then Christmas would roll around again, and they would die. They would actually literally shrivel up and die because of their hopes were smashed.
Yeah.
They were not that realistic. They were just total optimists. And I think one of the misnomers about resilience is that it's often thought that resilient people are optimists. And while that might be true, there is way more to it. So in the book that he wrote, Good to Great, he talks about the Stockdale paradox, and there's three key points to the Stockdale paradox that we need to pay attention to. There's more to it in the book, which I'd refer you to, Good to Great, the chapter on Stockdale paradox. But the first point is to accept the brutal facts. Mm-hmm. You're in a situation and you have things that are happening to you. I mean, look at the pandemic.
Yeah.
That just happened to us.
Yes.
I was in the second week of March, I was at a wedding in Southern California and flew back to Seattle, and 3 days later the whole thing was shut down.
Yeah.
mean, if the wedding had been a week later, they would have had to cancel it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing I could do about that. It happened. It was like the earthquake. I was in an earthquake in at one point in my life, and there was nothing I could do about it. So what you have to do when that happens is you have to accept the fact that it's happening to you and embrace the reality of it.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that he talks about that's important, that's a characteristics, and this would come back to, because the Stockdale paradox really is about resilience and surviving through and thriving through difficult times. So the second point that he made was that typically people that are very good at this and that are resilient, have the characteristic of resilience, have a strong belief in the meaning of life.
Mm.
This is very, very much tied to a person's core values.
Yeah.
And this would be true for an organization's core values. It's one of the places that I start with all of my clients. Every engagement I have with any client has to do with, we start with core values and purpose.
Yeah.
We have got to get that foundational piece in place. Otherwise, you're building a business on shifting sands.
Yeah.
So it's the meaning of life, and what is that meaning? I happen to be a Christian, and I have certain beliefs that reflect that whole belief system and worldview, and that frankly helps sustain me through difficult times. But everybody has to have something that they believe in, where they have meaning in life. The third principle has to do with innovation. So if you embrace the reality, you have a strong sense of purpose and meaning. Why are you there?
Yeah.
What's it all about? Once you have that set in place, a really strong foundation, then you can go off and build something else with what you've got. If what you've got and what you've been doing, for some reason, you can't do anymore. This is one of the reasons why contingency planning is so critically important. When Morgan Stanley operated 27 floors in the South Tower on 9/11, starting at floor 44.
Yeah.
If they did not have a contingency plan in place, and the reason that they had the contingency plan was because in 1993, they had an attack on the World Trade Center. And so they had a contingency plan. So when that first plane struck the North Tower, which unfortunately wiped out Cantor Fitzgerald, the South Tower, they said, we're going to evacuate. And they had a safety director who was like a former drill sergeant in the Marines, and he was running around with a bullhorn instructing people, get out, get out. So that by the time 10 minutes later, when the second plane hit South Tower, those floors were mostly evacuated, and that company lost 7 people instead of thousands, which they could have. And so the contingency plan saved Morgan Stanley. And so contingency plans can be very, very effective, and people, oftentimes leaders just kind of blow them off and don't pay much attention to contingency planning. It's a very, very big part of what we do at Great Game for our planning, is contingency planning. So, and then also innovation. It's like, all right, if you have something that's happened, and all of these companies that we're talking with on the panel are very, very creative and innovative. Mm-hmm. And frankly, it's probably one of the key things that got them through the situation that hit in late March.
Oh yeah.
I'm looking forward to hearing those stories and really expanding on them and talking about that principle.
By the way, Michael, this is an innovative bunch we're going to be talking to in our resilience event. And you're exactly right. The crisis actually, I think, brought out that innovation, part of what you're talking about, the Stockdale paradox. And if I could real quick, there is another thought from the Stockdale paradox that I've used a lot with leaders, and it is something that Jim Stockdale said, because the question was, well, if optimism isn't the solution, optimism, is a bad thing. So then what is the right approach? And he'd say, I knew I was getting out, but I didn't know how or when I was getting out. But he did have a conviction that he would succeed, but he didn't put a false hope or an optimistic hope on when or how. And so I've used that a lot with leaders to say, we are going to succeed, we're going to win, we just don't know how and we don't know when. And but it comes from that deep conviction, if you will, of purpose and meaning that you talked about, that we will do what it takes to win, and we will be resilient, we'll endure and prevail until that time.
Well, and it's so true. And we can go back and look at other catastrophic events in the history of our civilization. The primary one that I've studied a bit is the Holocaust.
Mm.
And some of the learnings that have come out of that are that those that did survive developed what they call a plastic shield around their psyche or their soul, that they knew that they were going to get out at some point unless they were physically killed, that they were not going to allow the forces that held them there to enter into the depths of their soul or their psyche. That was just a place that they protected. And they could do whatever they wanted to do to the physical body. But so when you think about resilience in those terms, it's really incredible, the power of the mind and their faith, I'm sure. I mean, I think it's true. We talked earlier, Kirk, about the wheel of balance, that, the spokes on the wheel. So, you've got a family and a career and, a financial and a spiritual and a health spoke. They're all there, right? There's got to be a balance to all of them.
I totally agree. Now, you said something earlier in this interview. I actually took a moment to write it down, but it was the idea that life goes on. And in those moments that are so hard where you do get knocked down, sometimes it doesn't appear that life goes on. But I think as you mentioned, when you get older and you've been through enough hard times, you start to realize there's life goes on, will continue, there will be a tomorrow. And I think sometimes that's helpful to know. Yeah.
I'm a fan of the theater, and my wife and I have seen various plays, one of which is the one that I remember is Annie, right? So the song, "The Sun Will Come Up Tomorrow."
Yeah.
I mean, when I was younger, my dog died, and I thought it was the end of the world. It just was devastating. Now, I don't have a dog today, but I had a dog die on me in the last decade or so, and yeah, I mean, it wasn't life-changing, but it was pretty emotional.
Yeah.
But not as bad as it was when I was a kid, right? So, I mean, I was a bit conditioned.
Yeah.
But over time, you're right. I mean, you realize that this world is going on, and we have a beautiful place to live, and it will continue. We have to think of those things when we're faced with catastrophic events. I mentioned family a minute ago. So, moving or divorce or whatever, those are big events. Death of a spouse. Some of us have had some of that happen in our lives with even our parents. As I get older, my mother still is living, but we've lost my dad, and my wife has lost her mother and father. And so, you deal with that. It just comes, and you deal with it as part of life.
No, and you do learn that. So I read your article on resilience that you wrote back in May, and I love the thoughts in there. And I think I mentioned to you before, the thought that I walked away with was the Asian Oriental proverb that said, "Knocked down 7 times, got up 8." And,
yeah, the Japanese have some very simple ways of stating complex things, and they're 5 whys. Ask why 5 times, and you'll get to the truth. You get knocked down 7 times, get up the 8th time. Yeah, I mean, it's just that resilience factor. You just keep getting up, and maybe you're running into the wall. I felt that when I had my medical technology company. I made 125 pitches to venture capital investors,
Wow.
and for a Series A investment, preferred Series A, and from Boston to Shanghai.
Wow.
And we got to term sheets several times, but we just never really got to cash. And with VCs, you just don't have it until you've got the cash in the bank.
Right.
Which oftentimes is even tranched at that level based on milestones. But still, that was hard, and they never say no. They just keep asking questions, and you keep going back answering the questions, and you're just flying all over the place, spending all this time and effort and resource to try to secure that. And so, yeah, I mean, getting knocked down. I mean, I've been knocked down. Oh gosh, I don't know how many times. Probably in my career, 3 or 4 times at least.
Yeah.
I've had some great successes, and I've had some failures. But I don't consider them failures. That's probably the wrong word to use. They're truly learning experiences. Jack Welch, who used to the CEO, chairman, CEO, and president of General Electric from 1985 to 2000, about 15-year run, did a phenomenal job. I didn't really agree with some of his tactics with people, but he certainly did increase the enterprise value of General Electric over that time. And he would often say, look, you took a swipe at the ball, you stood up to the plate and took that swing, and yeah, maybe it was a strike, but what did you learn from it? And, how have you applied that learning to your next endeavor? It's very, very rare to see someone succeed all the way through like a Bill Gates or a Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs had this quote that I love. It's, building a company of value takes a hell of a long time. People think it's an overnight success, but it takes a hell of a long time to do. And
it does.
And that's so true. That's true of any entity. I mean, it just takes a long time. You ask these people on the panel.
Yeah.
They've all of them, I'm sure, have experienced situations where they've been knocked down, and yet they've gotten up again. They're resilient. They're great examples of resilience.
Oh, absolutely. And a saying that came to mind for that was that a setback is a setup for a comeback.
Oh, there you go. Love it. That's that. You sound like you're from Japan. That's a simple statement that describes a complex issue. That's really great. Thank you.
No, but you're really bringing up the mindset and the thought process of somebody who is resilient. The sun will come up tomorrow. The birds will sing, tomorrow. And yeah, there's a difficulty, pain that has to be confronted in terms of that brutal reality. I think you brought up some really excellent points for us to think about. Now, if people want to get to know you better and engage you, I want to make certain that people who are listening to this know how to get a hold of you. Your website is Langhout International.
Yeah, website. They can come in through the link there on the Langhout International. They can find me at ceobrainfood.com. So those are the two primary places. LinkedIn, Mike Langhout at LinkedIn, or not at LinkedIn. I guess it's Mike Langhout.
Yeah.
LinkedIn /in/Mike Langhout. That's the actual.
Right. They can look you up.
Or they can look me up there, do a search on the name. I'm sure there's other places. I'm kind of all over the internet there. So,
but I highly recommend your articles that you've written. I highly recommend the podcasts that you're doing. I still have a list of podcasts that I haven't listened to yet. That I've listened to several, and there's still more. You do such a great job in your podcasts.
Thank you.
You are truly a treasure, I think, for camps, and I'm so glad that we're going to get a chance to see you facilitate this next upcoming event on business resilience. And I think everybody here had a chance to feel, the measure of your character and the measure of your understanding that you're bringing to the topic. And I really appreciate you.
Well, no, it's I who appreciate this opportunity, Kirk, and camps. As I said before, it's an outstanding organization with really, really great people, great companies. So I'm happy to be part of it, and looking forward to the time on the panel on Thursday.
Yeah, me too. So So, Michael, thank you for your time today, and then I'll look forward to seeing you on the panel.
All right.